In this video, I'm going to show editors who are editing a Times 10 Publications book in a Google Doc on the front end. We're doing a two-part edit. I call this the front end. So what we like to do is have authors submit their work in a Google Doc, and sometimes this will just be one chapter. And like I'm in one chapter right now. So what we do is we come in, and if it's one chapter like this, we're just going to go through and we're going to help the person clean it up and create what I call the perfect chapter. And obviously nothing's perfect, but we want the author to feel like, okay, this is what I want the rest of my chapters to look like. And this makes the second phase of editing easier. So sometimes an author will give you a whole book, and we'll still go in on what we call this front end. And what we want you as the editor to do is to go through one chapter, maybe two or into a second, but we want you to provide feedback in this document. Okay, so I'm just going to do this to show you. So here, this author has created notes. So here's this scratch pad. So I'll just leave that for now. But one of the things I'm going to say is I'm going to ask this author to put this to format better. So the first thing we're going to do before we do anything with content is we're going to format. So I'm just going to say, so I'm going to add, I put that here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add a comment to it. She will have, this person I know has read Hack Learning books. She probably has some at home. If not, she's certainly got a PDF or a Kindle version. She knows what Hack Learning books look like. So, but I'm just going to remind her here. So a specific thing I'll say is, so do not indent paragraphs. So I'm just going to say this. And again, the person probably knows this. This is a pretty rough draft. So I think in most cases you'll see better stuff in a Hack Learning series. You'll see more complete chapters, which is good. But whatever we can do on the front end here will make it easier on the back end. So this first edit really, it's probably a couple, 2, 3, 4 hours. And obviously I'm not going to give you a video that long, but these are some things that we can do. So right now I'm just sort of looking for structural things. Look for tendencies that authors have. Some authors, they do, they put 2 spaces after an end mark, which we don't want. Here we wouldn't want back-to-back quotation marks. So I would just say that. So, something like this. They can just, these are instructions that'll help. The thing about indenting, this is a big one. And our editors and proofreaders spend a ton of time on this. Okay, so we don't do this. We use the M dash. So if we can make people understand that, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, so, and then I show the person what that is, and that's gonna be really helpful. So now hopefully as the author continues, anytime they're using a dash, they're gonna use it the way we want, and that's less editing. So on this front end, we are doing a little bit more sort of line editing, mechanical stuff, along with content check. And I would almost say less about the content check, even though we do want to do some of that. We want to make sure things are in the right place. But, authors, as I said, they have tendencies. They do things. Some will put, too much space after an end mark. Some will use the wrong kind of dash. Some people love the exclamation mark, and they put it all over. And if we tell them on this end, as you continue to write, or if you already have a full manuscript, go through it and correct these things, there very rarely should be an exclamation mark in a book. I mean, there's just not a lot of room for it. We've had people who love italics. They want to emphasize every other word or sentence with italics, and we don't do that. Again, we say go very light on the italics. If you see a lot of referencing of other sources, using like APA style, we would say we like to be research light. So we want very little of this. We want to reference things parenthetically. So if I were talking about assessment and I said, in Hacking Assessment, Star Saxton says, and I could paraphrase that, I don't really need to cite that. Very few of our books have reference pages in the back, and that's fine. So, again, right now I'm just looking. We don't need all this extra space. So, again, just preparing a document. So, 1 extra space is fine. Again, this makes dumping the document into a Word document later, which is what you'll get on the second edit as an editor. It makes it so much easier. You don't have to go through. We don't want you to have to do a lot of formatting. Okay, here's a big one, and this should be blueprint for full implementation. So whatever book we're doing, if there's a format, if it's in a series, if it's in the Hack Learning series, if it's in the series, a leadership series, we'll have a format. We want to make sure people on the front end really adhere to that format. This is another one here, images. So I'm just going to say move this image. So then what we're going to do is on the editing phase, up here, we're going to give our editor an instruction. So then I'll just separate that out. So what that does is it tells our designer, who will have a folder filled with these images. And then if this is, if it's X.X and this says X.X in the folder, then it's very easy for that person, our designer, to put this in here. So, here I'm going to say, I'm going to add a comment. And again, these follow our style. Step 2, and we go with a period at the end of that. And you can always check this against other books. You can ask our project manager about it. And again, the extra spaces. So HIA is hack in action. So here we're going to add. So this is very rough. You see here she's asking for help. Is the voice okay? Is there stuff that I should move? So again, once I've gone through and I've done these things, once I've gone through and I've checked this mechanical stuff, and I've put in this feedback here, then I'm going to come back up and I'm going to do a read through, and now I'm going to talk about, is this the right problem? Restorative practices, improve student engagement and ownership is the title of this chapter. So, what's the problem? At first, I need to understand restorative practices, which I'm going to go down here and read the hack. And I want to make sure then that this problem answers the hack. Is it the problem? If I say, hey, here's the problem, what's the hack, and this is the answer, then that makes sense. Make sure that anything in the problem in a Hack Learning book stays problem. Oftentimes, writers will begin to answer, they'll start putting the hack in here. And we need to make sure they don't do that. Some of this might be that. I found Twitter, streams of peers talking about. So see, I would say right away, so just again, here I'm reminding the author about our sections. Any series we have with a template, chapter templates, it's really important that we get this right. And a lot of authors struggle on this. Here, this is what you can do tomorrow. So again, we want to spell out what you can do tomorrow. We open with a little introduction, then we go with bullet points. So I'm going to read this and make sure this is okay. Started right now with low prep activities, good. So can I do these things here tomorrow? If I can't really do them tomorrow or start them tomorrow or start planning them tomorrow, anything tomorrow that's action, then they don't belong here. Survey, create quick survey with Google Docs, that's fine. Constructive, destructive discussion. This scripted, facilitated discussion among students helps them realize. The only thing is this explains what it is, but it doesn't really have action. So I'm not totally sure what to do. And I emphasize that, there's no action. There has to be action. Typically we don't just put something like this. We start with a verb. We like a verb in these what you can do tomorrow. Survey your class, ask a question, conduct a conversation, use whatever these circles are. Start your class with a classroom circle. And this to me is just, that's the hack. That's the what you can do tomorrow. So, this is what it is, and be sure to bold them. Again, as much that the author does in a section like this that's right, a chapter, as much as they do right is less that you have to do on the back end. We don't want to spend a lot of time formatting. We don't want to do that on the back end. We don't want our proofreaders to have to fix things like dashes. They will invariably, but we don't want to do a lot of that. We want our authors, and we really coach our authors. That's why we break this editing process into 2 parts. I don't know many publishers who do that. We want to be done with it. We want our editor on a second edit to send that to a project manager and to say, okay, this is ready to go to design. This front end really makes that part easier. So, whatever we need here, let's format it correctly. So what you want to do is go to a book. We have different books, different series, different formats. So if you're in the blueprint and you're not sure how we format that, so right now I'm just going to open up a book and I'm going to remind myself what that blueprint looks like. So I just grab my nearest Hack Learning book or open up a PDF if that's what you have. And so I find that blueprint for full implementation should be bolded and centered. And then step 1, and whatever that is, should be, these are right, but we want them bolded, okay? And we're going to bold this just like this, and then we're going to start our next part on a different line. So she has this right. Again, you can tell she knows a little bit about Hack Learning. Bold these steps throughout, easy. So, I can do that, just this one. Have students decide. I don't like the verb have. So if we're talking about content, weak verbs is something it's one of the things I just can't stand. Have students decide on their own classroom rules. I would say discuss and decide on, something like that is better. So here I'm just giving a suggestion. Something like discuss and decide on classroom rules with students is better. And then this way now, the person's going to think about that. Always start each class with students first. So this is unclear to me. I don't know what this means. We need these to be clear. These are bolded. They're numbered. We have bullets. This is what people scan in our books. They go to these. They love them. I hear it all the time. They want these clear instructions. Although it's great if people read all the content, the goal is that a reader can come in and just scan these steps and say, okay, I've got it. If they can do that, great. I mean, we wouldn't have much of a book if we didn't put some annotation along with it. This is something we don't do. I would say we don't do this. Yeah, we just don't do it. It runs us into problems. I don't understand this. Again, I would say I don't understand. So, this might seem like an instruction that's sort of in your face, but sometimes it's important to do that. I mean, I always want to say please and thank you and avoid and use language that's kind and courteous and respectful. But this is important. We have to tell our authors this. Sometimes on the front end of editing, sometimes on the back end. Sometimes I tell them, I fear that this will get a bad review. This will spark someone to give a bad review on Amazon. Those are killers. We don't want to be, we're edgy, and I'm fine with edgy and progressive and, outside the box. But not with, snarky and combative and arrogant. We have to avoid that at all times. Okay, so I think you get the idea here. This is going to be very helpful to this person, and there might be a lot more, or some chapters of authors you're going to find you need less structure and you need more content help. They really don't understand these sections. Sometimes that'll be less of a problem and it'll be more mechanical. But the more we can get them, we tell authors we want to shape one chapter that is as close to perfect as possible, and then you emulate those the rest of the way. And if I spend 3 or 4 hours in one chapter on the front end, and then I'm going to get this document back later in a Word document for markup, I'm going to be, really, really clear. I'm going to have a much better document. And in fact, I may not have to do that much markup, or when I send it back to the proofreader and the author, it's pretty much done. So that's it. That's what we want to do on the front end in our Google Docs. I hope that helps. Ask our project manager or me questions if you have them.